Well, hey ho there. Another little take on the world of ag today. And I'm going to go deep on some opinions. And of course I am. But yes, what's in the times, because that's what people want to talk about. You know, I seemingly try to do that with this whole ag uncensored thing. Of course, sometimes I get broader. But, seeing last week, I talk about call it the farm bailout. That's what a lot of people are calling it, even though it's not officially that, but it is. That was news. So, we talk about that. But then there was the other part to it that I didn't really get into. And I've been trying to think through it a little bit. And I've seen a lot of talk over it, watched some stuff, listened to some stuff, bits and pieces. There's a lot of write ups on it, clearly. It's all over the news. $700 million going into this regenerative program for farming. What that is and what it means. Well, it's a lot of speculation, a lot of talk around it. And yeah, on the surface, it sounds interesting, I guess. Of course, to me, it's just kind of a lesser amount of what was already there to a point with things around CSP and the equip program, things of that nature. They were basically already there, but they were cut. Now it's like here's a rebranded version of it with a little bit different, you know, change to it. Or is it? I don't really know. I don't think the details are out enough, and who knows when those will actually get out. This is kind of what this current administration is. It does it, markets this idea out and this thing, and or, slowly, and then it's like, hey, we're gonna do this. Here's the amount we can do, and then they get feedback and blah blah blah, and something happens. Whatever. I'm not here to bitch about that, even though I can see sometimes how that can work. I can also see that sometimes that's not the right approach. And when it comes to governmental stuff, ugh, it just gets dangerous because when the government says it's going to do something, people are like, oh, well, it's going to do that. We all know in our heads, like, well, it's probably not going to work exactly that way. There's going to be challenges and problems and bureaucracy and issues, and we all like get it, but it's like, oh, and then when it turns out to be like not that, you're like, ugh, okay. So who knows? That's actually not really what I'm gonna get into here. If anything serves to be said on it is yes, there is this want for, you know, better health and food, and this is a piece of that. This is where this starts. I've known people that have talked to the administration on this thing that, I've actually added a little sentence here and there and something that was passed down, and I think pieces of that are in this, or at least they will be, around the whole food and health and nutrient dense stuff, and regenerative sustainability and how it all kind of ties together. Yeah, sure. Okay. And it all sounds great. And maybe that can work. Maybe that actually does work. Maybe if soils are healthier and that'll make a more nutrient dense crop, and maybe we can test that and verify that through those practices and verify it in the grains that we produce and the fruits we produce and the nuts and the berries and all the other fun crap. Maybe that can work. Maybe we can get back to that, the old ways of the nutrient dense crops that were growing, in the garden or whatever. We can feed more people in that same light. Mass, scalable garden, theory, if you want to call it that. And all the hippies will be happy, all the farmers will be happy because they're getting a premium on this, because they're also being like paid ahead of time to like get into it because they've been scared to do it because of all these other pressures from the chemical companies and now all this other works. Yep, all that maybe can work. Sure. On the surface, it all sounds great. But that is not as simple as everyone thinks. I've talked a little bit about it off and on here and there, is that, you know, cover crops don't work everywhere. Well, I mean, they can at times, and then they don't at all. And regenerative has this problem of being, this broad thing that not as, it's different everywhere. So yeah, there's the one big trigger thing there is, okay, if government puts something out, how do you actually define that? And is it fair for everybody? Can everybody actually really participate? At the same time, that's also been the problem in agriculture, is when the government puts out a program, everyone is kind of treated equally and can participate equally, when actually that's shouldn't really be done that way. Yeah, there are varying actuarial things, say like in crop insurance and how things are, covered and all that. But also, it's not good enough. And there's always been attempts to say, if we bring more data in and have that information, farmers should have, different rates and stuff like that and be covered differently. And yeah, it should be done that way. Even as I'm talking this morning is a post of like, oh, aquifers are running out of water. And, these areas that are irrigated, they're basically dryland deserts, grasslands, old prairie grasslands. A lot of it in the Central Plains where I live. We don't have aquifers up here, so we just, it's dryland farming and for the most part, 90, it's like 7% of North Dakota. South Dakota is similar, even Minnesota is similar, Iowa is similar, but there's varying degrees of it. But you get Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Colorado, a lot of irrigation, and some is more sustainable. Other parts, not at all. And they were done because they could. Why they could? Because they were protected through crop insurance. That winter wheat growing on pivots in western Kansas was, guaranteed to the same extent as the irrigated wheat a little more to the east where it gets a little more rain. All the cotton in Texas, pivots for miles. You go around Lubbock, Texas. But it's all like, you see where it's not irrigated. It's like, well, that's like a desert. And that's getting sucked dry. It's like, why? Like, and Texas has the highest loss ratio every year almost, unless we get a lot of water up here for PP, prevented plant, for crop insurance, then, then we might dabble on that high loss ratio. It's like between North Dakota and Texas all the time. We haven't had that as much up here lately. So, and that's actually shifted around. Weather patterns are getting weird. But Texas still, it's always just loses in respect to that, because most of it is a desert. Probably most of it shouldn't be farmed. But so then that lies in the question, examples like these. And every state has places like this. Don't get me wrong. I'm not just picking on Texas. It's just an example because that's true. Western North Dakota has some of these same problems. It's really dry. It's more prairie, grass, pasture area. Parts in western South Dakota, really these western divides into basically, there's a line there. You can see it. You can look at a map. You can look at a satellite map and you can see the line. It's like half of the Central Plains states are more productive and can be farmed and do it in a sustainable way than the western parts. Really not. It should be more for ranching, and it usually is. But that's grown because of, the prop up of prices and the base guarantees and things like that. So here's the point. If we talk about wanting to be regenerative and sustainable, okay, say of that 700 million, okay, say that more really dry land area but it's irrigated, and they put on cover crops and they do no-till because they actually have to, in those areas, they have to do no-till, and that's all great. But think of that. Should that land actually be in production anyways, and won't, because it actually can use more regenerative practices, actually in theory, compared to some of the other areas, because, those other more productive areas have heavier ground, heavier loams, heavier clays. They don't have irrigation. They don't need it. There's more natural rain. But they also maybe have to dig a little more because of that, because of the lay of the land. It's not all squares. It's actually, it shifts everything. Even the area I farm, there's like a weird formation under the ground where there's a shale formation. They get 33 pounds of nitrogen every year credit because of the soil it's in. It's really rare and unique and awesome for me because it saves me money. And I don't do anything. And that's why a lot of farming up there. And it's all the farms up there are pretty successful. It's true. It's luck of the draw, maybe. And, where I grew up, I don't know, about half of the ground is actually productive. Half of it is not. Sloughs and wet holes, ponds, and just, salty, sandy areas and knolls and all this. Half of it's good. But if we're blanket covering these groups to say, oh, now you can be regenerative. Well, if regenerative means, no-till and cover crops and smart irrigation, yeah, I guess it's easier to no-till in those western areas, those drier areas, and they can do smart irrigation because they have it. They can do cover crops because they don't get as much snow. It doesn't freeze as early because it doesn't. Like western North Dakota, for example, it's warmer faster. It freezes later. That maybe not the freeze one. I can't guarantee on that one, but I know it gets warmer early. They plant earlier all the time. So then they can get done with the crop earlier. They can do crops where they can, in the cold cycle, they can harvest a little early so they can establish a cover crop, but they're also establishing on something that maybe shouldn't be farmed at all. That's the point I'm bringing. We have to be really careful here, because just because it could be farmed in the mindset of what we think regenerative is, and it can get that money because it checks the boxes, does it actually mean that it should be? And will that just parlay the same problem we've always had? And this is in all parts of the world everywhere, but here in the US, is that we provide these, base guarantees, these base subsidies to basically put land in production that maybe it shouldn't. And guess what? Why are prices so deflated right now? Is because we have an oversupply. Sure, tariffs and other things definitely have an effect, and trade and all that. And don't get me wrong, that exists. We also have an oversupply. And other countries are starting to open up land, probably land they shouldn't be opening up. That's all over the world. Deforestation and stuff like that. Look at Brazil. And the effort's gone to take land out of brush grass areas. And sure, it's productive now, but when is it not going to be? Do we look at that? Do we look at the cropping patterns and how that actually shifts and changes the areas that are more consistent? The areas that just should be, probably always farmed. And then the areas that probably shouldn't be. This is the problem that's happening in the southern, the South. I've talked about this. The southern Corn Belt is where the real trouble is right now. And let me add to that. Got to bring the dogs in. Okay. Robert. As I've mentioned, down there, they were rice and cotton, the good old Delta, flood irrigation, which, uses a lot of water, not very efficient, not very regenerative. And, a lot of that's gone away. And, cotton too, the gins have dried up and, production's gone to other countries. And, Texas still owns it because they can do more irrigated side on that, which once again I said is not the most regenerative, sustainable thing. But they have it, and there they don't. They don't have that stuff set up. They don't have the infrastructure set up. Some maybe do. It's not like it doesn't exist, but it's also wetter there. But then that brings on disease. They have different challenges because it's a different area of the world. But Technology was put there to grow corn and beans. And for a while, it was working great. So they always had giant weed problems. It's like, well, here's one chemical to kill them all. And that's stopped working. It's like, well, here's two chemicals to kill them all. And seed prices now, double, but now, hey, there's two of them, not 10 of them. Okay. Well, now it's just ramped up into ridiculousness. Like, whenever I've traveled, I haven't traveled a lot recently into like those areas of the world, but call it 5, 6, 7 years ago, I'd go there and just, fields as far as you can see full of weeds. Way more. We don't get that here because we also have crop rotation. We're not just putting GMOs on GMOs on GMOs. We have crop rotation, and that dramatically helps using different chemistries and all that. That's more sustainable, actually. That's more regenerative than the other side. But yet, here's to my point. I'm not saying those farmers are bad. They've been given kind of a tough hand. But then that's the other point. Should those areas actually be farmed? They're in a river delta, and it's a river delta because it floods once in a while, and it causes chaos. People probably shouldn't even live there, because that can happen. And then insurance says you're covered. You can do it, and that's just call that home and life and auto and all that stuff. Even insurance is dictating commonality that you can do this everywhere. But we shouldn't. You see it more and more on, the coasts. Look at the LA wildfires. You should have never built a town there. Literally. You look in, Florida's hurricanes and stuff like that. Probably should stay a swamp. Giant marsh. That's what it mostly was. You look in Phoenix. There's no water there, but they built this giant city, and now there's water problems. We expanded into places that aren't sustainable to be at. Even the town right behind me, 30 miles Fargo, should have never been a city built there because it's this thick, heavy clay, and water does not go down, and the river floods a little bit. People build towns. They shouldn't even have basements. There's so many basement problems in Fargo. Yet every house has got a damn basement because it's kind of became the thing to do, and it was covered, and it maybe didn't affect anybody for a while. Then it started to rain more, and started to affect more people. More floods happened, and more snow, and then it melted, and then the river builds up, and what does it do? It floods like crazy, and then it flooded like crazy for a few years in a row. It cost a lot of money, and then they decided, let's build a giant river. Let's rechannel the river basically around the town. It started out at a meager 1 billion, and now it's like 6. It's like, what is sustainable and regenerative about that process? It's not. It's the point. This is my whole point to all of this. Great. We're talking 700 million going to go in. It's a start, and maybe that'll balloon up bigger and bigger, and heck, maybe it'll replace some of the other subsidies that have lost their ways from parts, not all parts, just parts, crop insurance, part on some of the other programs. EQIP's not perfect, CSB's not perfect. None of these programs are perfect, but this one's going to be, all right? This one's going to be perfect. I haven't even got into how they literally through data and technology even like govern all this crap. That's a whole nother thing. I'll dive into that here. But let's start with the basics here. Not if they're trying to blanket say you can do regenerative everywhere to this degree, or you can be sustainable this way, and you can grow better nutrient dense crops everywhere. Well, no, you can't. It's not that it can't be done. It's not that those markers can't be given. It's that we're just putting another dollar amount to force people to keep on producing something that is really not sustainable long term in that area of the world. It has been for a time, and ag works long cycles, 30, 40, 50, 100 years at times, but then it doesn't. Civilizations have moved and shifted and literally fell apart because of shifts in agriculture. The Mayans down in South America. That's what happened. It wasn't, conquistadors or whatever coming in and, murdering up people. It was changes in climate. For like, there's probably a lot of people that understand that a lot better than I do, but that's what I've gathered. It's like the agriculture system there kind of collapsed, and they, slowly starved, or they moved, they dispersed. This is, history. So yeah, I guess in agriculture in the United States, we're just kind of following what history does. It makes it hard to live somewhere all the time forever. But of course, modern society, we build things that allow us to do that. So, am I here saying like, oh, we gotta, move a city away and move that? No, do we have to stop farming these areas 100%? No, because it's not going to happen unless you do something drastic. Now, I've had this theory for a long time, and I think it actually is probably going to happen, regardless whether you like it or not. As I say, there are areas of the country that just probably shouldn't be farmed, or they shouldn't be farmed as much. They should be, 75% of the ag land there should actually not be farmed. Maybe some of it can, and it can be done in a certain way, sure. But in general, some areas should be greatly reduced. Some areas can stay at their marks. Some just maybe need to be a little bit, like parts of North Dakota. There are parts that should not be farmed. Even where I'm farming, southeast of me, 2 miles, mind you, 2 miles, should not be farmed. It's just potholes. And you're renting half the acres. You're renting all the acres and you're farming half of it. But because of sometimes how crop insurance works, especially when it's wet and PP, you get paid for not farming it. Well, okay. Is that a concept we need to revisit? Sure, we have CRP that says, take the land out of production for 10 years. And that's, for conservation and stuff like that. Well, maybe what needs to actually be set up is a process to say, actually, we're going to pay a little more to completely take this out. Probably for good. We'll revisit it every so often, or you can, whoever owns the land, whatever. You can revisit that process, and there is a process to reverse that out if certain metrics are met. But we're going to help you get out, because long term, this is not good. This will cost us more from crop insurance to subsidies to just other things. If we're just propping up places in rural areas to live just because they're there, because the farming community's there on land that's not productive and shouldn't be farmed, well, then the whole area is unsustainable. But it worked for a while. Cut down trees, we opened up prairie grass. Like, it worked for a while. It worked fine. People got established and your family's there and everyone's happy. I get it. I grew up in an area like that. So you can't tell me that I don't get it. I do. Probably the only way this really works well long term in ag, for it to be sustainable in the United States and probably other parts of the world in the same method, is you probably have to actually pay to remove people, to move them to a place that's more sustainable. Maybe they can still farm somewhere else. Maybe that's the answer. We're getting less and less farms. Well, we maybe just had too many. Technology can reduce them. Like, we don't need 10 million farmers out there. We have 2 on paper, and it's really like 250,000 that do 95% of all production, and it's really like 10,000 that do 50% of the production. It is true. But then we're worried about big farms. Like, well, what if we redistributed the people that are in it? Get them out of areas that suck. Like, I've talked to people in parts of the Corn Belt. I'm like, yeah, we can grow 200 bushel of corn here in North Dakota, and the land's $100 an acre, and these costs are less, less regulation, less taxes. It's like, and they're like, are you kidding me? They're like, our land is $10,000 an acre here, and we're paying $250 an acre for rent, and we're only getting 200 bushel corn and 50 bushel beans. Like, man, we can get that here. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be sustainable here all the time, but it is a little bit more. So maybe regen and sustainability program, they actually work better in places that fit it better. Maybe that is here. We can grow more crops. We have more infrastructure. You have to look at places like that. You know, why the Corn Belt became the Corn Belt. Luckily, it had good soil and stuff like that. We have major metropolitan areas being grown. Minneapolis, Chicago, Des Moines. You had these rivers you could ship things through. We didn't have interstates. We didn't have trucks. We didn't have all that crap. We had rivers. And that, you know, all these things fit together. And that's why that land is, you know, still pretty farmable. And that's why a lot of farmers in those productive areas still do pretty good. Here in the Red River Valley, flat, heavy ground, holds moisture well, long term. You pretty much always get a crop. You just, it always grows pretty good stuff. And it grows stuff that is better than other stuff, you know, sugar beets and potatoes and things like that. There's different pockets. Like I said, there's all sorts of that. But what if, you know, we're getting less population in areas that maybe actually need it more, because sustain farming in areas where it is actually sustainable. What if we got the people that have the passion and the understanding and the knowledge from areas where it's not sustainable anymore, and we help them get to places where it is to help that area? Maybe that's what's needed. It's just an idea. I'm not saying this is perfect. This is what I'm trying to think through on what this whole regenerative 700 million, what's it going to start? What's it going to spark? And it could spark this, you know, different mindset of going there. It surely could. I doubt it will, because, you know, the concentration on is healthier, you know, food, which will make us better. I was like, yeah, we can be the healthiest individual in the world. I can, you know, I'm fairly healthy, fairly thin. I'm fairly strong. I can, you know, I can dabble. I'm a scrapper. I could be healthier though, and sure, I could eat better food and exercise a little more and things like that. But if the world around me sucks because farming is not sustainable in the area that I'm at, or the ag sector I'm in, and ag tech that I'm in, a lot of it's not sustainable, unfortunately. Yeah, you can be physically healthy, and the nutrient dense things you eat, sure, can make you feel a little better. But when everything around you is not, because of the systems in place, well, then your mental side goes. And that's the bigger problem in agriculture. Really, it's the emotional and mental state. Farmers are killing themselves because of the economy, not because they don't have good enough regenerative programs, because they don't have good enough sustainability things. They're not getting enough subsidies from the government. It's that the process has failed them where they are at. And from corporate XYZ to government XYZ to even probably their personal XYZ, sure, it all concludes and all builds. But if the governments of the world want to put money into better food and health, and, you know, but through that method, through regenerative practices and sustainability, maybe we need to really look at what that really means. Because life should be more regenerative and sustainable, not just our food. Yeah, we need to eat to live. I get that. And this guy really needs to eat because he's hungry. Because every time I get home, he needs to eat. I also feed him the same, probably shitty dog food every day. But he's also a happy dog. I let him out. I pet him. He sleeps with us in our bed. You know, that's important too. You could have the best, you could be given a steak every day. That's, you know, that's what dogs, you know, wolves evolved from. But if he's alone and beaten down and lives in a cage, then that doesn't matter, does it? That's my worry. That's the problem with some of these things. They're not thought out well enough on what it really means to farm a certain way. And then things are thrown at us, dictated to us. Like, gotta do it this way, gotta do it this way. It's like, well, sometimes that doesn't fit as well. And it fits some, great. And for others, it doesn't. And when it doesn't, and it forces change that's uncomfortable, then you get other problems. These are some of the larger ass things that I think about. I think about that on the farm, and I'm going to do. It's like, yeah, I got to probably start off doing what's normal. Dig the ground a little bit. I got to probably put in the same crops everyone else does. I got to spray the same things everyone else does. I get the same equipment pretty much everyone else does. Yeah, gets me established. And that makes me feel a little more confident in moving forward. But is that my long-term goal? No. I want to grow crops that are not normal commodities. I want to grow things that I can market differently. I can maybe bag myself, turn into my own product, sell directly to restaurants or to people themselves. I'd like to get that. I know I can't do that on everything, because if you really do the math, if I did this specialty wheat on 160 acres, I get 50 bushels an acre. Well, that's 8,000 bushels. Well, that's also, oh gosh, math. 8 times 6, 48. That's 480,000 pounds of flour. I don't know if I mathed that right. Just maybe. That's a shit ton of flour. I don't know if I could actually process all of that together though and sell it out and make it into bread or to noodles or something. It takes all this other crap. So it's nice. The theory's nice. It's all great until isn't. And while the want is there, sometimes it's easier just to grow the damn commodity and let someone else deal with the rest. So where's sustainable? Where's regen? By doing that, if you say it's nutrient dense, can you actually get that to somebody? Can you prove it's getting to somebody? Or is it just another marketing ploy? That's the other side of this. Say we can all do this in the right way. And I'm not going to go much further here, but I'm on a roll. My dogs are getting pissy anyways. Okay. We're paying someone to do regenerative, and maybe it's if you put it on all acres of ag, it's like comes like to $2 an acre, which is not going to happen because not everyone can do it. Not everyone's going to do it. Honestly, a quarter of all acres in the U.S. shouldn't be farmed anyways, probably, and probably about half the acres really can't do these practices to the full extent for whatever they're going to pay. So let's say, but you can't. Let's say you can use these practices. So, and you get $40 an acre, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 20, whatever. It's going to have to be big enough for people to change. So it's probably going to have to be something like 50. Okay. Cool. So for me, that'd be about $40,000. Can I do that enough to change my ways to do regenerative things? I don't really know. Maybe. Say I can. Okay. I got that. Now, what do I need to do? Okay, I probably need to report that, right? That I did X, Y, Z. Well, I'll probably have the technology to do it and access and all that fun crap, but let's look at the normal Joe. Will they? I guess it depends on how they want to report it and how they go about that. So then there's like, are you going to do it the way it should be done and just do it through crop insurance processes and through that whole reporting mechanism because it's already there? Or are you going to start a whole new thing and half this money is just going to go to create a new place where people can go to work to do old reporting methods? Or are we going to do it smart? Are we going to use all this other data and these processes to do it and do it correctly? Are we going to fine tune it to where some of those regenerative things actually work? Does regenerative mean blanket things in biologicals and things that aren't, old chemistries and shit like that? Is that what that means? Okay. But those things don't work everywhere or don't work everywhere well. There's variation in it. Should we be looking at that? Well, the government can't do reporting to that level, and they probably never will. It's not anytime soon. It's like, how is that going to happen? How are you actually going to report this stuff? Will it just be a simple piece of paper? Because, well, yeah, it'll have to be. Because how the government works is all sides have to be done. There's a digital answer, but there has to be a paper answer too. Something you can print, someone can sign, someone can verify, fill in, right? Because they might not have a computer. So I got cut off from my last recording, technical app, whatever, just problems. So I'm adding this clip back in because I wasn't done finishing my my thought. Yeah, this one's getting long. I might break it up into a few points because I got to edit this crap anyways, which I usually don't do because it takes a lot of time. It's a bitch. So, anyways, where I was getting at is, I think we can do all these regenerative things, and sure, I could do them on the farm and get paid whatever whatever amount it is, say $50 an acre. If I I follow these steps, I do little covers, do a little no-till, I reduce fertilizer, I reduce chemicals, stuff like that. I would assume that that's what you're getting paid to do, is stuff like that. Okay, can I confirm that? Yeah, I should be able to. I know how the tech world works, and I should have those things in place. Okay, now I gotta. What else? What else does that prove? It just proves that I did it, and that's what I'm getting paid for. Okay, I guess fine. But does that actually? What is that doing in ag? Are we using it to actually make, say, food healthier? Because then we'd have to, it's like the assumptions are there. I guess that's what I'm trying to say is, can the data that supports the process that proves they're doing these things to get paid this money and to change these practices, are they just basically going off the assumption that it's better for everything, for my farm, for the ag economy? I mean, I suppose that's how that would work. But as we build this up, as it builds up, as it probably would be, depends on politics and everything else. But then what? Okay, if we want to get into taking this crop it's more regenerative, that I would be growing, or more sustainable, whatever the rules are that get my $50 and change my practices, how do we get to the next level? So do I get paid? Could I get paid more money to then prove that it's more nutrient dense? Maybe. You do some extra testing. It takes more money. It takes more time and processes. Okay, well then will I have a market for that? Where I get more money for that? Or is it just the government saying, well, it's just, now it's in the supply, so there's the percentage of nutrient dense in, say, the wheat that I would grow is larger now because we've paid to do this. Is that how that's going to work? Or is it going to be, no, actually, it needs to be sold through these different places because they will accept this and they'll give you a premium? Okay, well, maybe that's one way. I don't know. The question that I'm trying to bring up here is, we can be paid to do these things. And people should be paid to do them on places that should do it, not places that really shouldn't do it. Because we really should be farming land to the point in its state that it can be farmed and should be farmed long term, not just because it can grow something, not just because you can no-till it, not just because you can grow a cover crop on it. Are we going to get into those things? Probably not. Should we? Yes. And that's a whole nother dynamic of things. But I get to the other side is, even the current state of probably what's going to happen, as I illustrated. Oh, no-till cover crops, less chemicals, less fertilizers, whatever. Will that actually help me? Oh, it's $50. Well, in some years, no-tilling, because the ground is not, dried out enough and it's a wet year, I could reduce yield by 10 to 25%. Honestly, that's real. Okay, well, that's more than $50 an acre. That doesn't really make sense then, in those years. But according to this program, I'd have to constantly do it. Okay, well, eventually it'll get there. Well, maybe, maybe not. In some years where it's also more wet, guess what? You have more disease pressure. Well, I might have to spray more fungicides on so that I won't lose another 10 to 20%. Well, that doesn't follow that rule either. What if I can no-till it in, and that's all fine, but then, yeah, it rains a shit ton. And then I also am losing nitrogen. Maybe I gotta, say I'm corn, I gotta side dress more. I actually gotta put more on because I lost some just by rain more. I can't control that. I guess in irrigated areas you can, but in non-irrigated areas you can't. So then, do I not qualify for that money because I had to do that to keep things sustainable for my farm and regenerative for the economics of my farm? Yeah, well, that's a problem. All right, say those things didn't happen. Here comes harvest. um, you know, I do all the right things, and then do can I harvest it the right way? Well, I guess I'd have to do different things in wheat ground and up here in the north. People have to desiccate it, especially on larger farms, because it's a lot of it. And to harvest it consistently and properly, so you're not waiting forever, and so the wheat doesn't lodge. And especially in other crops like barley, if it lodges, you're screwed for quality. And if wheat starts to lodge, you're screwed for quality because of things called falling numbers, and then protein can get all out of whack, and then you can get sprouting if it rains too much. That's why people desiccate. And Roundup has been what's on there. Well, that's probably not going to pass the whole regenerative sustainability test being paid. So, gosh, that's not going to work. Well, I guess I could swath it. Maybe I can swath it. Well, some farms have a crap ton of acres, and swathing a crap ton of acres is, it's expensive. It's more, you know, might cost more. I need another header now. I got rid of my pickup head that picked up swaths. I got rid of my swather because I didn't need it. Had one in the 90s, not now. Like in canola, they made varieties that can stand and they don't shatter. So people went to straight heads. They used to swath everything. Well, now they don't really do that. So people get rid of that. Well, to be regenerative, now I have to get into that. Well, $50, geez. I don't think that's going to change. Like my harvestability now goes down, and a windstorm can come through and blow it all the way, and all goes away anyways. Well, I guess crop insurance can cover that, maybe to a point. It doesn't cover it all. So when I think of these scenarios, the problem is these scenarios happen often, and they're random, they're variable. I cannot control those things. I would need to be paid probably a lot more to really stick to the core things that what regenerative and sustainability means. Maybe $50. It's probably like $200. Honestly, that's what farms will say, especially in my area of the world. They're like, it's just not worth doing it. Because the things I have done, the changes I have done to make it so I can grow consistently somewhat of a decent, say, weed crop, I have to do it the way I've been doing it. Because if I did it the way people perceive I should do it, I couldn't farm. I'd lose my ass every year. And $50, if that's about what it would be, even if it's $100, it's not enough necessarily. Maybe in some years, yeah, sure. Other years not. Because we have a lot more variability of things here, weather, and we have shorter time frames to put in a crop. Maybe other areas don't. Corn Belt maybe doesn't. They seem to have more seasonal availability to do different things like this. Not all areas, but some areas. But then they have other problems. Taxes going up, land values going unsustainably high, land rents going crazy, and they have more pest issues, more disease pressure, more, things like that. Well, maybe that's not enough to do it either. So what are we? What's? Do we think of that? Well, the answer is most don't, because they don't go on a farm. They don't talk to farmers about how this could work, and they try to bland. You have to put up bland policy because it covers. You got to cover everyone because otherwise it's too complicated. This is the whole point that I'm trying to gather at is just because we can doesn't mean we should. And then if we do, can we actually prove that it works in an area when we have all these different variables and all these different niche areas? The data can show XYZ, but can it? It might not. Even the data might show that doing regenerative and sustainability practices that you're getting paid for, it actually doesn't work in this area of the world. It does here, but it doesn't there. But yet that's looked at as great equally when it's not great equally. This is all the things that you should think about and think through on what that even means. 700 million going up. Great, cool. We're going to change the world. We're going to feed the world better, not just more. We're going to feed it better. We're going to, make ag better. Well, that doesn't always make it better. There are core contextual problems at hand. And to really change it takes deeper thinking and a lot more complex stuff and a lot harder decisions. And things that'll make a lot of people very uncomfortable. And some people very happy. And it's a very hard thing to balance. And the government's usually terrible at balancing things like that. So is there an answer? Is there a better way to do this? Probably. I don't know the exact answer. But if ag wants to be at the table and be better at what it is, then at the very least, you have to be a little more vocal and come together a little bit more about saying the things that I'm trying to say or trying to think through and getting someone else's opinion on it and coming together a little more collectively saying, yeah, that's great, but hey, here's really what's going on in our world. And then someone else, the group will come in and do that. And then maybe we can systematically change how we actually do agriculture instead of chasing these giant goals, these giant yields, these push, bigger, better, faster, more efficient. Maybe it's less about that than we think. And maybe there's other ways that agriculture can fit into the normal consumer lives too. I don't know. Is it just through trendy words and processes and government money? Probably not. Can it help in the right ways? Maybe. I don't know if I have the answer. I guess I'm asking a lot more questions and bringing a lot more scenarios and calling out kind of the realities. Well, I hope others do that too and think through the process, because it is not black and white. And for any of you out there that are thinking that program or things like that, whatever the future holds on it, and you're so giddy about it because it's going to change this and shift that. Well, it's not. But it will be abused. And it might be abused by the people that are so giddy about it. Because they're like, now I can take advantage of that. I can make that for me. I can make my business work off that, so I do this and this. And at the end of the day, what really happens is that $50 just goes to somebody else to prove to the right person that you should get the $50. And then it really doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help me. Oh, now this new thing is more. It's a regenerative machine. It's this combine is regenerative powered. This chemical is regenerative approved. This software is regen sustainable reporting. All it does is just create things to suck money out of you. That's all it does. We need to make these decisions on a logical and emotional state. not just a technical one, not just one that allows us to be okay to do it because we got paid to do it. We have to want to do it to make it make sense for our world. And this is inherently a lot of the problems in ag. A lot of the things that are out there to make the things that are grown by farmers and all that are new ways to take more money out of it, not new ways to make it better. That is what's sold and marketed. And some of those things are true. It's not that not everything's terrible. It's just there's the other side. There's always the other side of the coin. You know, profitability, and you need that to keep going. Get into old capitalism debates in there. That's a whole nother beast and where the world's going. So, but it all ties together. Trust me. You know it too. Well, anyways, these are a lot of things to think about. And this is fucking deep. Here's my bigger uncensored part. I just challenge you to think through it. And hopefully you'll listen to all this crap if I put it together right. I'll write it out. So this one's probably going to be really long. So maybe I'll break it up into a few parts. We'll see. Anyways, that's what I got so far. Really curious on what you think, because this is what I'm thinking. There's others out there that probably have their own opinions too. Similar and probably way different. That's good. Put them out there for the world to see. We'll see you later.